Today we're going to take a look at the 2022 Honda CB300R. We'll talk about where this Neo Sports Cafe style 300cc bike fits into Honda's current naked sport bike lineup. We'll dive into its specs and features and throw some R&D info in there too. Plus, we'll start it up and show you what it sounds like and a lot more. But first, if you guys find any info in this video helpful, please take a second and hit the like button. Liking the video and commenting below really helps with growing this channel through YouTube's algorithm, and I really appreciate the help. So first up, where does the CB300R fit in Honda's current sport bike lineup? Now keep in mind, American Honda hasn't released the entire 2022 model lineup just yet, so some of this info will change, and we're just talking about sport models, as I don't see many people cross-shopping this with a super sport bike. First up are the single-cylinder models, and we'll start with the Grom 125 at $33.99, and then you move up to the bike we're looking at today at $49.49. Followed up by its brother, the CBR 300R at $47.99 if you'd rather have fairings in your typical sport bike look. Then we move up to the models with a parallel twin engine with the CB500F at $64.99, followed up by the CBR 500R at $69.99. Then we move up to the big dogs with an inline 4-cylinder engine with the CB650R at $91.99, which is followed up by the CBR 650R at $96.99. And last but not least, we have the CB1000R at $12,999. I want to take a quick second and say thank you to Southern Honda Power Sports for opening their doors to me and allowing me to come pick through their inventory for these videos. They are a massive Honda Power Sports dealer here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, with tons of inventory from new Hondas to used Harleys and everything in between that they sell to people from all over the USA. So check out the link in the description below and head over to their website to see if they can save you some money on your next toy. And now that we've got that out of the way, let's jump into some more info on the CB300R. Now, do you have any options when buying this bike? That'll be a big fat nope. Not only did Honda remove the non-ABS model from the equation in 2020, taking away that option, but they have also left us with only one color here in the States since 2020 as well. So if you don't like this matte pearl blue, you're up a creek without a paddle. Now don't get me wrong, this color is beautiful and video just doesn't do it justice, and paired up with these bronze wheels, it really pops. But come on Honda, we need more than one color option. But what do you guys think? Would you like to see Honda show this bike some love with more paint options? And next up, did Honda change anything for this year? Nope, everything on this 2022 is the same, dating back to 2018 when it was first announced to pretty much replace the outgoing CB300F. Now let's jump into the chassis and suspension. The frame is made from high tensile steel tubing and pressed steel, with the steel pivot plates separated from the main frame. Thanks to this design, the main frame between the head and seat rail is free from the stress that's applied to the rear wheel. This helps enable each piece to be optimized in their strength and overall profile. The swing arm has increased thickness compared to the CB300F at the crossmember, but tapered wall thickness towards the hollowed rear axle for what Honda considered to be the ideal amount of flexibility. And let's face it, this isn't a super sport bike where they're worried about shaving off every last ounce of weight with titanium, aluminum, and so on. But even without all of those things that would do nothing but drive the price up, it's still a pretty light package, coming in at only 317 pounds for its curb weight. And for comparison, its sibling, the CBR 300R, comes in at 364 pounds. Pair that up with a fairly low seat height at 31.5 inches and a 49.6% front and 50.4% rear weight bias, and this bike is super easy to ride. Now let's move over to the suspension. Up front you have a non-adjustable Showa 41mm inverted fork that brings in 5.1 inches of travel, which is a step above the 37mm conventional fork on the CBR 300R. While in the rear you have Honda's ProLink design with a single Showa shock that has 7 steps of preload adjustability, and it helps bring in 4.2 inches of travel. Then when it comes to braking, up front you have a 296mm floating disc paired up with a radial mounted Nissan 4-piston caliper, which is another step above the CBR 300R, and in the rear you have a smaller 220mm rear disc with a single piston caliper. ABS used to be an option on these bikes, but now it comes standard, and with that you have a 2-channel system that works through an IMU to give the most precise front to rear distribution of ABS depending on the situation at hand. And those brakes are helping slow down a 17-inch wheel up front with a 110/70 tire, while out back you have another 17-inch wheel with a 150/60 tire, and the finish on these wheels is something else. I've got to say, good job Honda on nailing that color while doing something different from your typical black. And next up, let's get into the engine and drivetrain. It has a 286cc liquid-cooled and fuel-injected dual overhead cam 4-valve engine that's mated up to a 6-speed transmission. It has a 76/63mm bore with a 10:7:1 compression ratio and is pumping out 30.9 horsepower at 8,500 RPM and 20 foot-pounds of torque at 7,500 RPM. And to counter the extra vibration from the longer stroke that Honda threw at it to create this larger engine from what was the CBR 250R power plant, the balancer shafts were made with slightly more weight. Also, to reduce reciprocating weight and friction, the piston carries a very short skirt and features a slick molybdenum coating. They also created light striations on the piston, lowering the tension of the piston rings, as well as a smooth, shot peen hardened finish to the pin itself. Plus, the cylinder is offset from the center of the crankshaft 4mm towards the exhaust side, which reduces the lateral resistance generated between the piston and cylinder during the power stroke. Pair all of that up with the rest of the R&D that went into it, and you'll see why this is one of the smoothest single-cylinder engines on the planet. Now, I could ramble on for quite some time about the development that went into this engine that's been shared across many platforms now, but I don't want to bore you guys, so we'll move on. And if you'd like that kind of detailed info, check out HondaProKevin.com, and I'll have a link down below. Now, how about fuel economy? This legendary little engine brings in a rating of 71 miles per gallon. Pair those numbers up with the 2.7 gallon fuel tank and your range is going to be a little under 200 miles before you're walking, which is a decent drop from the CBR 300R that has a 3.4 gallon fuel tank with the same rating. And thankfully, Honda designed this engine to be as economical as possible in all aspects, and with that comes a very relaxed maintenance schedule that won't break the bank, as you can see here in the owner's manual. Now let's bounce around the bike and touch on a few different things. And when it comes to electronics, you don't have any modes to flip through or anything like that, as this is a pretty simple and basic overall package. You have LED lighting all the way around, which should be standard by now on all bikes, and you also have one of the coolest looking headlights out there that's styled after its big brother on the CB1000R, which has trickled down to the 650, 300, and 125 Neo Sports Cafe CB models. While riding down the road, you'll be staring at this thin LCD display that shows you the usual info like speed, RPM, trip meters, and so on, and you also have a shift light thrown in there too. And while staring at those gauges, you've got a fat handlebar setup compared to what was on the CB300F, and they have a 40-degree radius that helps bring in a 7.5-foot turning radius. Now, how about storage? Even though the tail section is pretty tiny, you've got a little bit of room. Just stick your key in this hole and pop the seat off, and there's your storage. Now, I know it's not much, but anything is better than nothing when it comes to bikes like this. Now let's start it up, show you guys what it sounds like, and then we'll come back for a few more things. And that's the 2022 CB300R. If you're wanting a great entry-level naked sport bike that's also well suited for people that have been riding their whole life and just prefer a smaller overall package,
That's what she said.
this bike is hard to beat. If you don't mind the different styling, even though they share the same engine, this CB300R is steps above the CBR 300R with better braking, suspension, and electronics, and it's lighter to boot. Why is that? Well, the CB300R was a new platform released in 2018, whereas the CBR 300R has been around since 2015 and was carried over from the CBR 250R platform that was originally released back in 2011. That's why the CBR is a little dated in some aspects when compared against the CB. That's also why it's past time for Honda to update the CBR 300R platform. Or just give us the CBR 250RR and I'll be a happy camper. Aside from Honda throwing the battery under the fuel tank to make life more difficult than it has to be when you need to swap it out, for what it is, I think Honda nailed it on this bike. Would I like to see a touch more horsepower and adjustable suspension up front? 100%. But the majority of people buying these don't ever touch the suspension, so I can see why Honda does it this way to help keep costs down, and for most people it's plenty peppy enough. But that's enough of me rambling though. What do you guys think about this bike? And what would you like to see Honda change next year to bring this platform to the next level? Let me know what you think down in the comments section and I'll be joining in on the conversation too. That's a wrap for this one though. Thanks again for watching and supporting all of this. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next one. Molybdenum. Molybdenum.